Sometimes the words that change your life forever come from the most unexpected places. As I stand here today, watching my daughter walk across her college graduation stage, I can't help but remember that rainy Tuesday when a stranger's single sentence rewrote our entire story. If you've ever felt like you were drowning in life's responsibilities with no lifeline in sight, this story might just be the one you need to hear today. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to catch more life-changing stories that remind us how powerful a single moment can be. My name is Daniel Carter, and 5 years ago, I was a broken man. My wife Elaine had passed away after a short, brutal battle with cancer, leaving me alone to raise our 8-year-old daughter, Lily. The grief was crushing, but there was no time to fall apart completely. Lily needed me, and the mortgage still needed paying, and somehow life cruelly demanded that we keep moving forward despite the gaping hole in our lives. I worked as an architectural designer at a mid-sized firm, a job that had once been my passion. In the months after Elaine's death, I found myself going through the motions, staring blankly at building plans and missing deadlines. My boss, who had been understanding at first, was beginning to leave pointed notes about my performance. I couldn't blame him, but I also couldn't seem to find my way back to the person I'd been before. Mornings were the hardest. I'd wake up reaching for Elaine, the crushing reality hitting me anew each day when my hand found only cold, empty sheets. Then I'd drag myself out of bed to wake Lily, who had started having nightmares and was increasingly withdrawn at school. Her teacher had called twice already about her falling grades and tendency to sit alone during recess. The guilt I felt was overwhelming. Not only had I failed to save my wife, but I was failing our daughter too. "Daddy, can you make my hair like Mommy used to?" Lily would ask some mornings, her small face pinched with hope that broke my heart every time. I'd fumble with elastic bands and hair clips, creating lopsided ponytails that made her frown at her reflection. "Never mind," she'd say quietly, taking out whatever messy creation I'd managed and settling for wearing her hair down. Another reminder that I couldn't replace what she'd lost. Our house, once filled with Elaine's laughter and the smell of her infamous chocolate chip cookies, had become a museum of memories we were afraid to disturb. Her clothes still hung in the closet. Her gardening gloves still sat by the back door. I couldn't bear to move them, as if doing so would erase the last physical proof that she had existed in our space. But living among these relics was slowly suffocating us both. Dinner became a silent affair, both of us pushing food around our plates. Bedtime stories, once a magical ritual in our house with Elaine doing all the character voices, now felt hollow with just my flat, tired reading. I'd watch Lily's eyelids grow heavy, kiss her forehead, and then retreat to the living room where I'd pour myself a glass of whiskey and stare at the wall until exhaustion finally pulled me to sleep. The bills started piling up. Medical expenses from Elaine's treatment had drained our savings. I'd taken too much time off work and my paycheck reflected it. One evening, after Lily was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with papers spread out before me, a calculator showing numbers that wouldn't balance no matter how many times I redid the math. The house we'd bought together, the one where we'd planned to raise our family and grow old, might soon be lost to us as well. It was raining the Tuesday everything changed. Not a gentle spring rain, but a relentless downpour that matched my mood perfectly. I had dropped Lily off at school, forgetting it was her show and tell day until I saw her crestfallen face. Another failure to add to my growing list. My car had made an ominous knocking sound the entire drive to work, and my boss had scheduled an ominous-sounding performance review for that afternoon. By lunchtime, I couldn't face another minute in that building. I found myself wandering into a small café I'd never noticed before, drawn by the warm light spilling onto the wet sidewalk. The sign above the door read, "Second Chances," in faded blue paint. Inside, the place was nearly empty, just an elderly couple sharing a scone in the corner and a woman behind the counter with curly gray hair and kind eyes. I ordered a black coffee and took a seat by the window, watching the rain turn the world into a blurry watercolor. "Mind if I join you?" The woman who'd served my coffee stood beside my table, holding her own steaming mug. Before I could mumble an excuse about preferring to be alone, she'd already pulled out the chair opposite mine. "I'm Margaret. I own this place." I introduced myself mechanically, hoping she'd sense my mood and leave me to my misery. Instead, she settled in as if we were old friends meeting for a scheduled chat. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, Daniel," she said simply. No pity in her voice, just observation. Something about her straightforward approach broke through my usual defenses. Maybe it was because she was a stranger, or perhaps I had finally reached my breaking point, but I found myself telling her everything, about Elaine, about Lily's struggles, about my fear that I was failing at the one job that mattered most now, being a father. Margaret listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or sipping her coffee. When I finally ran out of words, feeling oddly lighter for having released them, she set down her mug and looked at me with eyes that seemed to see straight through to my soul. "The love you're trying to bury is the very thing that will save you both." That was it. One sentence. 10 simple words. But something in the way she said them, with absolute certainty, with a gentle firmness that brooked no argument, made them sink deep into my consciousness where they took root immediately. I stared at her, waiting for the explanation, the step-by-step guide that would follow such a profound statement. But Margaret simply smiled, patted my hand, and stood up. "Your coffee's on the house today. Come back sometime and tell me how you're doing." And then she was gone, back behind the counter, leaving me alone with those words echoing in my mind. "The love you're trying to bury is the very thing that will save you both." I sat there until my coffee went cold, turning her words over and over in my mind. Was I trying to bury my love for Elaine? No, I felt it constantly, an ache that never subsided. But then it hit me, I had been trying to contain my grief, to function despite it, to work around it rather than through it. In doing so, I'd walled off not just the pain but the love that caused it. And I'd been teaching Lily to do the same, without ever meaning to. That evening, instead of our usual silent dinner, I took a deep breath and asked Lily to tell me about her favorite memory of her mother. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth, surprise flickering across her small face. "Really?" she asked cautiously, as if it might be a trick. "Really," I assured her. "I'd love to hear it." She set down her fork and thought for a moment. "Remember when Mom let me help plant the sunflowers in the backyard? And she said I was better at gardening than she was because my hands were magic?" A smile tugged at her lips, perhaps the first genuine one I'd seen in months. "She was right," I said, my voice rough with emotion. "You do have magic hands. Those sunflowers grew taller than the fence." She named them all, Lily continued, her eyes lighting up with the memory. "There was Big Bertha and Sunny Side Up Ann. Mr. Stretchy Pants," I finished with her, and suddenly we were both laughing through tears. That night became the first of many where we deliberately shared our memories of Elaine. It hurt, God, it hurt so much at first. But Margaret had been right. The love that we'd been afraid to acknowledge, because it came paired with so much pain, was exactly what we needed to save ourselves from drowning in grief. The next day, I called a therapist that had been recommended by the hospital's grief counselor months ago, making appointments for both Lily and myself. I found a support group for single parents and forced myself to attend, sitting awkwardly in a circle of strangers who somehow understood exactly what my days felt like. One step at a time, we began to rebuild. I took down some of Elaine's photos and put them in albums that Lily and I would look through together on purpose, rather than being constantly, passively surrounded by reminders. Some of her clothes went to donation, a process that left me sitting on our bedroom floor surrounded by her sweaters, breathing in the last traces of her perfume and sobbing like I hadn't allowed myself to do in front of Lily. But it felt cleansing, necessary. We planted new sunflowers in the backyard that spring, Lily's small hands working the soil with surprising confidence. "These ones are for Mom," she said matter-of-factly, "but they're also for us." The wisdom of children can be staggering sometimes. At work, I finally opened up to my boss about my struggles instead of trying to pretend I was fine. To my surprise, he connected me with the company's employee assistance program, which helped me manage my workload while I got back on my feet. The performance review I'd been dreading turned into a candid conversation about grief and recovery in the workplace. Slowly, our home began to feel alive again. Not the same as before, it never could be, but with a new kind of warmth. We started new traditions: Sunday morning pancakes in shapes that made us laugh, movie nights with popcorn fights, and a memory jar where we'd write down moments with Elaine as they came to us, to be read together on her birthday. Lily's teacher called again, but this time to tell me she'd seen improvement, that my daughter had made a new friend and had raised her hand in class 3 times that week. Small victories that felt monumental. There were still hard days, of course. Days when the absence felt so acute it was hard to breathe. Lily's first mother-daughter event at school left us both in tears the night before, but we went through her memory box and picked out one of Elaine's scarves for her to wear, a tangible reminder that her mother was still with her in the ways that mattered most. I returned to the café several times, sometimes finding Margaret there, sometimes not. When she was, we'd talk, and I'd update her on our progress. She never offered advice unless I asked for it, but her presence itself was comforting, a reminder of that pivotal moment when her words had shifted something fundamental inside me. About 6 months after our first meeting, I brought Lily with me to the café. Margaret's face lit up when she saw us together, and she insisted on serving Lily her first grown-up coffee, mostly warm milk with just a splash of coffee and enough whipped cream to make her giggle with delight. "You must be the magical Lily I've heard so much about," Margaret said, pulling up a chair to join us. "Your dad talks about you all the time." Lily studied Margaret with the serious expression she reserved for people she was deciding whether to trust. "Did you know my mom?" she asked suddenly. Margaret shook her head. "No, honey, I didn't have that privilege. But I know she must have been extraordinary because she helped create you, and she chose your dad to love." Lily nodded, accepting this logic. "She was the best," she said simply, before diving back into her whipped cream mountain. Over the following years, second chances became our regular Saturday morning spot. Margaret became something between a friend and family member, someone who had entered our lives at exactly the right moment with exactly the right words. 3 years after that first rainy day, I found myself sitting across from Margaret again, this time on purpose, nervously turning my coffee cup in my hands. "Just ask her, Daniel," Margaret said with an exasperated smile. "The worst she can say is no." She was Catherine, Lily's art teacher, and a woman who had slowly worked her way into our lives and hearts over the past year. Smart, funny, and patient with both my daughter's artistic experiments and my hesitant steps back into the dating world, she had become important to us in ways I hadn't anticipated. What if Lily isn't ready? What if I'm not ready? I asked, voicing the fears that kept me awake at night. Margaret reached across the table and stilled my fidgeting hands. "Loving someone new doesn't diminish what you had with Elaine. You know that, right? Your heart isn't a finite space." I did know that, intellectually at least. But taking the step from friendly outings with Catherine to acknowledging we might be building something more felt monumental, terrifying in its implications. "The love you're trying to bury is the very thing that will save you both," Margaret repeated her original words to me, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "That's still true, Daniel. But now there's room for new love too, if you're brave enough to let it in." That night, after Lily was asleep, I called Catherine and asked her on a proper date, just the two of us. She said yes without hesitation, and the relief and joy I felt surprised me with its intensity. When I told Lily over breakfast the next morning, her response took me completely by surprise. "Finally," she exclaimed, rolling her eyes in perfect preteen fashion. "Ms. K has been waiting forever. She told Emma's mom that she thought you were never going to ask." I nearly choked on my coffee. "You knew? And you're okay with it?" Lily gave me a look that suggested I was being particularly dense. "Dad, Mom would want you to be happy. She told me that, you know, when she was sick." She made me promise to make sure you didn't get too sad. Her voice softened. And Ms. K makes you smile the way Mom did in the pictures. Children. Just when you think they couldn't possibly surprise you more. Catherine and I took things slowly, mindful of the precious balance we'd worked so hard to create in our lives. But she fit seamlessly into our world, respecting Elaine's memory while creating her own place in our hearts. When I finally introduced her to Margaret, the two hit it off immediately, conferring in whispers that made me nervous and then laughing together like old friends. 2 years after that first official date, Catherine moved into our home, bringing with her colorful canvases that brightened our walls and a patient understanding that some days would still be hard. On those days, she would quietly support us both, never trying to replace what we'd lost but offering her own kind of comfort. Lily, now a teenager with strong opinions about everything, had given her enthusiastic approval, helping Catherine decorate her home studio and proudly introducing her to friends as her bonus mom. The day I proposed, it was Lily who helped me plan everything, insisting that it be at Second Chances, where so much of our healing had begun. Margaret closed the cafe to regular customers for the evening, and with Lily's help, we filled it with fairy lights and Catherine's favorite flowers. When Catherine walked in, expecting our usual Saturday breakfast and instead finding the 3 people who had helped rebuild her life after her own difficult divorce, she burst into tears before I could even drop to one knee. "Yes," she said through her tears, "yes, yes, yes." Later that night, as Catherine and Lily excitedly discussed wedding plans, I slipped away to thank Margaret. I found her washing dishes, humming softly to herself. "I don't know how to thank you," I said, picking up a towel to dry the mug she handed me. "That sentence you spoke to me 5 years ago, it changed everything." Margaret smiled, her eyes wise and kind as ever. "Words have power, Daniel, but only when they fall on ears ready to hear them and hearts ready to understand. You did the hard work. You and Lily. Still, I insisted, you saw something in me that day that I couldn't see in myself. Some potential for healing that I'd given up on." She turned off the water and faced me fully. What I saw was a father who loved his daughter and his wife so much that it was tearing him apart. "All I did was remind you that love, even when it hurts, is still the answer, not the problem." As I stand here today, watching Lily accept her diploma, Catherine's hand warm in mine, I can't help but marvel at how far we've come. Lily's graduation speech as valedictorian had the entire audience in tears as she spoke about resilience and the different shapes family can take. She thanked her mother, who taught me strength even in her absence, and Catherine, who showed me that there's always room for more love. And she thanked me, words that will forever be etched in my heart, "Dad, you taught me that it's possible to honor the past while still embracing the future." Later tonight, we'll celebrate at Second Chances, now a successful restaurant that Margaret still runs with the same compassion and wisdom. Lily's acceptance to medical school, her determination to specialize in oncology inspired by the mother she lost too soon. Catherine's first major gallery showing next month. Our family, built from broken pieces but stronger at the mended places. One sentence changed everything for us. The love you're trying to bury is the very thing that will save you both. In your own life, remember that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means allowing your love, even when tangled with grief, to transform you rather than destroy you. It means finding the courage to let that love breathe and grow, even when it hurts. It means understanding that your heart can expand to hold both sorrow and joy, past and future, endings and new beginnings. If you've connected with our story today, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to hear more stories of transformation and hope. Sometimes the words that change everything come from unexpected places, perhaps even from a stranger on the internet, sharing a story that reminds you that no matter how dark things seem, there is always a path forward, illuminated by love.